Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. This is the first time I've ever had a guest speaker. This is my lovely husband, Matthew, and he is here. We're going to be talking about boundaries today. I've figured out how to make my living room a recording studio with my husband's help. So again, this is Matthew. We've been together about 6 years, and we're here to talk to you today about boundaries. All right, so first question for you, Matt. You have been with me for about 6 years, and boundaries with my crazy family have been an ongoing part of our relationship. So the question for you is, what has it been like watching me navigate that whole situation and setting boundaries along the way?
So you've definitely become more assertive over the years with your family, I think in part because you've worked through some of the issues that you had previously and have realized that I think it's important to set those boundaries and therefore being able to actually express that clearly in a way that actually definitively lays that out, I think is what has changed more than anything else. Before it was kind of, you were imposing those boundaries but not directly with your family, if that makes sense. So like you were, in your mind maybe setting a boundary but not necessarily expressing it, and then over the past couple of years it's been more clearly you've been able to express it to your family in a way that gets the message across, I think, more specifically than it did previously, is what I've noticed has changed.
Okay. I mean, see, in my mind, I had expressed those boundaries.
That's what I'm saying. In your mind you did.
Well, no, that's not...
Yeah.
In my recollection, I had set those boundaries, but maybe I wasn't as explicit as writing a letter and saying these are the boundaries.
And that was, I think, the culmination of it, because once you wrote that letter, that's what really sort of laid it out on the table for everyone. Going through the history of everything and setting that before we got married, and basically just educating a lot of your family on the prior issues that they didn't necessarily have the full picture of.
Yeah.
And so once they actually had that full picture, that helped them better understand the boundaries that you were setting, why you were setting those boundaries, and why it was important to you. And that's what I think helped a lot of your other family members that you don't have boundaries with, like your grandparents, for example.
Right.
Help them understand
why these boundaries
the full picture,
were in place.
And therefore were much more supportive of that, versus previously they were just like, well, can't you just make peace kind of thing, that kind of thing. So I think that's what's changed.
Yeah, I've definitely been more, and I've been much more direct, I guess, I think, is what you're saying. It's much more direct with what those boundaries are, instead of going, nope, no contact, and then...
Not even necessarily being direct. You've been direct, I think, the whole time that we've been together. It's just what was missing from that directness a lot, what I thought was the context. And then therefore being able to actually show rather than tell someone why you're setting the boundary, I think is what made the difference.
Okay, that makes sense.
So.
All right, interesting. Okay, next question. When we first got together, was there anything about my relationship with my family or the boundaries I had that was difficult for you to understand?
I guess you can look at this from a perspective of, I am an attorney. and so being able to understand the nature of what had happened previously in your family relationship, I had that going into it. I had that sort of context and knowledge more than most people would have. And so I was able to look through a lot of, I guess you can think of it almost like I'm able to look past a lot of the emotional stuff and go, okay, what's the facts of the situation? How did this happen? And that kind of thing. And then seeing like the court records and everything else that get associated with what had happened previously in your life, it was like, oh, okay, this is what needed to happen kind of thing. I mean, there's a reason why the case went as far as it did kind of thing. And that's because other people outside of your, inner circle also said that needed to happen and took the steps necessary that they should have taken as, public officials, district attorneys, law enforcement, things like that. And so it's like, I think being able to see that and understand that and how that system works, especially in our current legal framework where a lot of the stuff that we deal with, just gets swept under the rug kind
or
of thing.
Or never gets to court
or
because
never
there's
gets
not enough
as far
evidence.
as where it should get kind of thing. And so, being able to see, okay, it went that far for a reason.
Yeah. There was evidence, there was victims, there was XYZ.
Yep.
And he was convicted, which is hard to do with some of these kinds of cases, too.
And then so going back to sort of your question, it's like, how did that affect us? It's like, well, the emotional side of it didn't affect me as much because it's like the thing that I kept saying to myself was, you did what you needed to do in that situation. And so it's like there's no other way to really look at that. I didn't really have any issues, I guess you can say, with like how you react in that situation, because it's like if I'm thinking about it honestly and intellectually, it's like you reacted in such a way that like you had no other choice in the way that you did it. And so given that, it's like I didn't have any real problems with how you handled the situation, because it's like, I think of it as like if I was in that situation, that's probably how I would have reacted too, and what the steps that I would have taken.
That makes sense. Yeah. Interesting. So the next question kind of links to the first one, which is, do you think the way I handle boundaries has changed since you've known me? And not just with my family, but with us, with other things. Has that changed as I've evolved and learned and grown?
I mean, I would like to think that we're not necessarily setting boundaries with each other. So
well, okay.
But in nearly in the same context.
No, not in the same
way.
Context, of course.
And so it's like it's communication more than anything else. And so being able to just talk to one another, I think, is important. And like, just to use an example, like when we first started dating, you had expressed to me clearly that you had problems with confrontation.
Which I still do.
Which you still do. But at the same time, it's like I think you've gotten a little bit more comfortable, particularly with me, and just being able to communicate with me. Because I would like to think that even though if we have confrontation, it's you're more comfortable with it now because we're not blowing up at each other.
Well, we've never
really
raised our voices at each other,
right?
Ever. It's always, but confrontation doesn't necessarily mean angry yelling. It's like, hey, I'm frustrated at X, and even that, knowing that you're a safe person, gives me anxiety still.
Right.
But I do think I've gotten better.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is that over time, it's not really like necessarily boundary setting. It's you just being able to communicate, hey, this doesn't make me feel good, or hey, we should do something different, or something like that. That I think has definitely gotten better. It's hard to see from like your family perspective, because some of those times I'm not necessarily like involved.
Sure.
So I don't necessarily know, what it is, the conversation you're having with like a family member or whatnot, because I'm not physically there or present kind of thing. So you might tell me afterwards or something like that. But it feels like you've gotten better at it overall, I would say, if that makes sense.
I guess when I think about boundaries setting and some of the things that may have evolved over the last 6 years have been really interesting from a work perspective, with some very difficult work relationships and work situations. And I still have my workaholic tendencies. I still work a lot of hours because of my commitment to my job and to doing a good job. But I do think I've gotten better at setting boundaries with the personal relationships at work, where I'm not letting the negativity of others impact me as much. I feel like I'm doing a little bit better at making a decision like, I'm okay if I leave this company. I need to do what's better for my health, my mental health, my physical health. I'm not saying I'm great at it, but I think I'm doing better. I don't know if you think the same.
It is a little circumstantial, at least when you're talking about your work stuff, because obviously there have been issues with prior jobs that are outside your control kind of thing. And so it's like, I think the bigger question is, what are you doing in that type of situation more than has it gotten better? And I would say, yes, you are getting better at understanding the dynamics to be able to address those problems as they arise.
Yeah.
But you can't necessarily always control your environment either.
Of course.
So,
yeah. Well, and I think that in itself is its own piece of like understanding that I can't control all the boundaries, or I can't control my environment, and figuring out how to set those boundaries within the ever-evolving situations and dynamics, right? Just a thought. That's what I think of in terms of where I've grown the most. I've had some really rough years, but at the same time, I feel like I'm along with my kind of on a parallel track of I'm setting better relationships with family. I'm setting better relationships with friends and boundaries with friends and family and so on. I'm also doing a better job in the work situation of not becoming so emotionally invested that it becomes this heartbreak when something bad happens. It's like, this is a job, and clearly the job only cares so much about me. I need to make sure I'm limiting how much I care about them. And that itself is a boundary. At least that's the way I think about it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Next question. So from your perspective, what happens to me when someone pushes or violates one of my boundaries?
So the only time that it's like immediately coming to mind is I remember we were at your brother's wedding in Tahoe.
Okay.
And
Someone.
a certain someone had come up, tried to interact with you, tried to give you a hug kind of thing. And it's almost like you you had this like low like growl that you made that was kind of like, you know, like a cat like getting upset kind of thing.
I forgot about that.
And you just sort of stood there and sort of almost like shut down in some extent. Now I haven't seen that happen necessarily as much, but that's for some reason that's what comes to mind.
I was not happy. This was my mother, by the way. I know you're shocked.
So
I forgot about that. I think because you turned to me like, "What was that? Did you just growl at your mom?"
Yeah,
I'm like,
pretty much.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I guess I did. It wasn't.
So.
I didn't think about it. It was quite involuntary.
Yeah.
I've set this boundary already. She's violating it.
Yeah, but so,
I'm not gonna make a scene, but I'm growling at you. I'm sorry.
By not making a scene, you made the scene. So
I didn't make a scene.
Well,
we were
I
not
clearly
with everybody.
noticed,
You were
so
standing next to me. That's
I'm sure other people noticed as well. But in any event, it's like it's almost like watching you like knowing that they're going to violate the boundary and you let them do it anyway, as opposed to
making a scene and like.
But it's like, what's making a scene? Like, because it's like you could in that situation just as equally have walked away or just said no thank you or
I see.
something like that.
I mean,
so
a lot of times I don't feel like I can walk away.
But that's again, I think, going to your issues with confrontation.
Oh,
man, you don't want to actually stop that
from happening, I just deal with it.
So you just deal with it and then internalize it and then get irritated because of it.
That's
as opposed
true. That's true.
Just sort of saying no.
Yeah.
Effectively.
That's true.
So
that was to be said. That was before my letter.
That was before your letter, yes.
And I think she's not great at the boundary thing, but I think she's gotten a little better. She's not initiating. I don't think she's initiated any physical contact since then. Which
I can't think of necessarily that. Well, I mean, I think there might have been a few times, like when we had like family dinners at your grandparents or something like that, where she was also there.
She's been there.
But
I've dealt with her, but I don't. She's been better at the physical contact and not trying to forcibly initiate. Which
and I think
really
you've
good.
also probably gotten better at just generally avoiding the issue entirely.
That's
which
true.
is another
good thing.
Step to take, I guess you can think
That's
of it that
true.
way. So
I don't think I've ever done that before, aside from that one situation. I just remember being so frustrated that day. She was violating so many boundaries. Not my boundaries. She was violating my brother and his wife's boundaries, and I was so upset on their behalf. And then, of course, she started violating my own boundaries. I'm like, Ugh. All right, next question. Have there been times when you thought I should set a stronger boundary or that I was taking on something I didn't need to?
that one's kind of a harder question because the only one I think that could really answer that is you. I mean, just from an outside perspective, like if you need to set a stronger boundary, it's like, I guess.
Well, you can have an opinion still.
Right, but at the same time, I guess it really kind of depends on the context because I can't necessarily think of a situation where you've been very good about setting clear boundaries, at least since that letter, like you said. but that's also not, there's no like in between there.
And don't just think any boundary. I know that like so there was a situation last year where a couple people from Search and Rescue were being really hostile toward me. And I remember when I finally decided to cut ties with them, and I was like, I am not responding to them until they apologize for this inappropriate and disrespectful behavior. And your response, do you remember what your response was?
Not specifically, but about time or something like that?
Something like, about time. These guys have never treated you very nicely. Every 6 months, this person, one of the two people, is making you cry, and you're upset about it. And then he never apologizes. And you were just like, they have never really been your friends. You guys have worked together with SAR, but they've never treated you very nice. And that was your kind of response. And I remember you just saying something like you said, about time. I'm glad you decided to make this. But you never said anything before that. Like, you never were going, hey, you really need to cut these guys off. They're, or at least the one person of the two that was not being very kind.
Well, that situation was, I think, a little bit more complicated by the fact that was your search and rescue group. And so it's like you're kind of stuck interacting with them.
Right.
If you wanted to continue working in search and rescue kind of thing. So it's like I couldn't tell you, it's like just
stop interacting
with them kind of thing, because you're going to be forced to in other respects anyway. Now, that situation ultimately worked itself out.
Yeah,
through a separate situation without you necessarily getting involved. But yeah, I was always sort of thinking, it's like, why are you doing this to yourself?
Why? Well,
because it's like it's almost like you're putting yourself in that situation.
I don't mean to.
But I'm not saying you mean to, but it's like it's almost like that, where you're like openly exposing yourself to the potential issue, knowing that it's going to happen. It's like crying wolf all over again, kind of thing, because it happened, like I said, so frequently that it was only a matter of time before it would happen again at some point in the future.
Well, and I don't.
But at the same time, conversely, it's the cost benefit, side of it, where it's like you still want to participate in search and rescue at the same time.
Well, and the two of those people, I mean, I for a very long time considered them to be very good friends and allies in the search and rescue group, and we had very similar visions. And yes, one of those people would have like his meltdowns every 6 months, and he'd be very mean to people, which is not just to me. And I think I was attributing, I was being overly generous to say he's got his own issues that he's working through.
Which is completely fair too,
it's
though.
not personal.
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't, like, at least most of the time, it wasn't personal. He was just a jerk. And then he would, whatever he was dealing with, he'd get through it, and then he'd be nice again. And then we were accomplishing great things together. And so, like, their last big blow-ups where it got really bad was kind of devastating, because I felt like we had so much potential to achieve great things. We had some really interesting opportunities with leadership changes on their search and rescue team. And in my mind, I'm going, we've got these great opportunities to really shape the vision of the future. And then the two people in question couldn't figure out how to compromise with the rest of leadership. And then things kind of went off the rails, and they became so cruel to me, which was completely unrelated from what was happening internally. But I was hearing about all this mean, disrespectful things they were saying to other people and all this stuff. And that's when I finally told you, I was like, I'm not even going to engage. I'm just done. I'm so tired of being treated this way when my vision is pretty much the same as theirs, which is a bigger, better SAR. And I think, I mean, it all worked out the way it worked out, like you said, completely without me anyway. But yeah, that was an interesting friendship breakup that I haven't had to do in a really long time.
Was it a friendship?
Well, I thought it was.
And again, that's kind of where I go, only you can really answer that.
Okay.
But as a third-party perspective, it didn't seem like it was helpful in any way.
It didn't seem like a productive friendship.
Productive friendship, I should
like
say.
Kind of one-sided is what you're saying.
It's the costs outweighed the benefits, effectively.
I don't think it was always like that, because I'd known them for, 10 12 years now, or 11 years now, but
And that could be just a change of circumstance.
I think it's hard sometimes to adjust expectations in a friendship. You don't always see it's going downhill until it gets really downhill. Because it started out as a very positive friendship, and then, yeah. So that's an area I could definitely continue working on for sure.
Yep.
Next question. Have there ever been boundaries I've set that you weren't sure you agreed with, and how did we navigate that?
I've never really thought that, I would say.
Okay.
That there's been a boundary that you've set. Because it's, for me, it's like my first thought about that is like, okay, has she set a boundary that's just purely illogical?
I don't think I really do
And you're
that.
not that kind of person anyway. So it's like boundaries that you're setting are not at all based in emotion or have no sort of backing as far as like when you think about it, why it's there, why it makes sense kind of thing. So there's never really been something that I've thought that you've done or set a boundary wise specifically. I mean, obviously with us, it's we don't really, I'd like to think we don't have that issue, but
I hope not.
On top of which, it's like with your family even, I mean, it's, the situations have been significant enough that obviously warrant it. And you see that with some of your other family members imposing similar boundaries. And so it kind of reinforces that it's not something that is illogical or unreasonable under the circumstances. So I've never really thought that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just asked the question. I think I set very logical boundaries, but, you could be in the corner here going, well, I don't know.
I would also like to think that I'd try and
say
challenge
something.
you or say something like...
You're pretty good about that.
I'm also pretty good about playing devil's advocate anyway. And so it's
sometimes he does not need to do that, but
which I don't need to do always, but I mean that's the lawyer brain in me, because it's like sometimes the best way to better understand your position is to try and understand the other side's position.
Sure.
And being able to work through their arguments and sort of go, okay, wait a minute, yes, that kind of makes sense, but then have something on your side in response to that as like, yes, that might be true, but because of this, that's why that doesn't matter, or something like that. And that's just the legal brain, working its way, the in my head kind of thing. And having that is a good way to better understand yourself and your position when you can empathize and intellectually understand the other side as well.
Sure.
So.
How have my boundaries with my family affected you or our marriage?
I'm not a very emotionally driven person. So it's always been if that's how you prefer your boundaries with your parents kind of thing, that's fine. It's never been it's almost like I don't feel like it's my place to set that boundary in the first place, unless it was somehow spilling over into our relationship. So like if they were doing something that was like clearly causing you grief or something like that, and therefore then impacting us, that would be a different question. But you actually just setting the boundary, saying, I don't want this, I don't want to have a relationship with them or something like that, that's your choice. And it's not something that I'm in the position to sort of make one way or the other. And so, from that perspective, again, it's like I think the real question there is, set whatever boundaries you want. The bigger issue is, do those boundaries impact us in our relationship? And in reality, the boundaries that you're setting, don't. So it's.
But I think they would if I didn't set those boundaries, because
yes, and so you see that with like your other family members who are now starting to impose their own boundaries because they hadn't
before.
And
it was
so
making it worse.
That's where it might make a difference, and that's where I was saying is it's starting to impact their relationship with each other. So now they have to set those boundaries with the other parties or whatnot, things like that.
But that makes sense.
We haven't had that issue, I don't think.
Well, and I mean, to be fair, I started setting these boundaries long before you and I met. I was the first person in the family, any of the family, to sever ties with my mother, with my father fully. And so I kind of had to be that first push. And so what you're seeing with other families and so on happening is I dealt with this a long time before I met you generally, even though there's been issues since, especially around our marriage, right? That was a huge catalyst for a blow up. But most of those boundaries, I mean, I stopped responding to my mother's messages and phone calls 12 years ago, something like that, 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it makes sense. I think knowing you would be quite upset if I started wanting to allow these people in our lives, especially when we have children someday. But at the same time, because my boundaries have been so firm, I think that's probably why you're able to say, no, it hasn't really been a problem.
I guess it's just been in my nature that I've been much more selective with my personal relationships.
That's true.
And so, like you've made the comments before, it's like my friend group compared to yours is quite small.
Quite small.
There's a certain peacefulness
in only having two friends.
Only having a handful of friends that is hard to get away from, and so that definitely helps. So.
I think I have 100 times as many people I go friends as you do. That's so funny.
But it's like in my mind, it's like I've told you this before. It's like a question. It's like, okay, you can call them friends, but it's
there's definitely levels of friends.
Yeah. So I
have about a dozen close friends. You have like 3.
Yeah.
So yeah. Hey, it all works out. Like you said, it's probably much more peaceful. You also have a lot less stuff going on weekends with your friends than I do. Like, I have friends things again because I love my friends and I want to spend time with them.
Yeah, now it's loaded with search and rescue too.
And with search and rescue, I'm very busy. I know. I know. Your life is much calmer than mine. So this is a big topic we've had over the last couple of years. We've been trying to adopt for several years, and we've been trying to, we've done IVF several times and some other things. So we've had a lot of discussions about boundaries for our future family, even before we have children. What have those conversations been like from your perspective?
So specifically with the boundaries with your family, I guess, is the one that you're...
Well, we've had lots of discussions about boundaries. We've talked about, like, will our kids be on social media? We've talked about, like, those are all boundaries that we've talked through.
Well, some of those are boundaries and some of those are more, what's your parenting style going to be like, kind of thing.
Those are all kind of boundaries.
And so I guess you can say they're kind of boundaries, but it's like, I feel like social media has been the bane of humanity, kind of thing.
As we record this for my YouTube.
I mean, so it's like at the same time, it's like if we have kids, I want to make sure that they try and grow up without that as much as possible.
Sure.
And things like that. And you have to understand too that it's like, as a parent, you're not going to be able to keep your kids safe from everything.
Yeah.
The real goal, I think, of any parent should be making sure that your kids are prepared.
Yeah.
To be, in any situation that they're in.
Sure. But I think my question is more along the lines of, as we've kind of figured out these boundaries together, kind of preemptively, right? Try to align on some of the core boundaries. How has that, I guess that engagement been? I mean, I feel like generally we're on the same page, but we're not always on the same page. And we have definitely had disagreements about what certain things will look like with our children and how, we'll raise them. And we're both pretty darn stubborn and when it comes to certain things. So as we've kind of aligned, and I know that we're going to have, if we ever are blessed to be adopting or have our own child, we're going to have many more hundreds and thousands of conversations about boundaries and decisions along the way. But how has the initial kind of discussions been? I feel like they've been pretty good. I do feel like we sometimes still struggle a little bit when we disagree because we both want our way. We're both not the greatest at compromise sometimes, but we're also very respectful in how we go about it. So it's an interesting dynamic sometimes.
Yeah, and it's like I'm not, because we're gonna have, everybody's gonna have those sort of different approaches to things in life, generally whatever. I think the important thing with a kid and a child generally is to, whatever your approach is, it should always be focused on the best interests of the child.
100%.
And, whether or not, one particular approach or method is better than the other can be a matter of subjectivity that doesn't necessarily have a clear answer. And so as long as we're both approaching it from that perspective, which I generally think that we are.
Yeah.
And there's never been any real question of that. I think, yeah, there might be, disagreements on certain things, but it's not going to be anything that's going to be so significantly, problematic that that's going to be the issue. And so it's like, as long as we can both recognize that, then I think we'll be able to work through whatever that issue is. But it's also very hard to speculate on what that could be. So, just because we don't know what the world's going to look like in 10, 15 years.
No, exactly.
So especially in our lifetime, seeing what has changed over the years, kind of thing, we'll be dealing with different things as they come up, kind of thing, that you couldn't have anticipated. Just as social media and the internet and all the things we have to deal with now.
We never had to deal with any of this crap in our childhood.
But going back to your boundaries that you're talking about with like your family and your parents and things like that, I think we're both pretty much aligned.
Those are the easy ones, I think.
I think they're easy. Yeah.
Those ones are the easy ones. I think the other stuff is always not so clear cut.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people, everyone has to deal with, setting boundaries as they bring children into the world or adopt children and figure out how to develop their family. And it's a challenge, right? Especially because there's two parents, and then, they have to figure out how to work through that and decide together. Unless you're a single parent, and then you can make all the decisions you want. You don't have to argue with anyone about it.
Let's not try and go there, though.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Pretty much everyone has to figure out, how to compromise boundaries as they move forward in a relationship with somebody, especially when it comes to children.
Yep.
But I think you're right. As long as both of us are going into it with best interest of children in mind, then generally we're probably going to align mostly on everything anyway. Yeah. There's been very little disagreements we've had on stuff, but like I said, it's just a question.
And they've been minor.
They've all been very minor.
They haven't really been. And even then, it's like I feel like we've talked through it.
I think we do a good job at that. Yeah. So my next question is, how do you support your partner's boundary when the relationship or conflict isn't actually yours?
I mean, it's kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like recognizing that it's not really my place to set that boundary. Effectively, it's just the only real, I guess, way that I can truly support it is if I'm not sure about it, I try and understand more what it is you're setting and why specifically. Mm-hmm. But it's like we've gone through that, at least I think to the extent that we can. And so it's like I have that clear understanding. And so it's never been a question of, I think, support other than just to say, like, okay, what happens if this, is broken, kind of thing? Like, how would you want me to respond in that situation? Right. Or what would you like me to do, kind of thing? And just sort of deferring to you on that kind of thing. Because it's like you could run through those what if scenarios on what if, that boundary is pushed or broken or something happens, kind of thing. And that's really, I think, how I would approach it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Sure. So if somebody in the audience their partner is dealing with crazy family like I have, what would be some advice that you would want to give that partner or spouse to say, like, this is how you can best support your partner as they deal with boundary setting with their family and navigating it through it with them as a team?
I mean, coming at it directly from initially just a point of understanding, I think, is the biggest thing. And then once you have that understanding, everything else sort of naturally flows through that. And so as long as you can understand what the boundary is, why it's being set, and there's you at that point should be able to determine if it's an appropriate boundary or not. And if that's the case, and if it is, then you have to look at it from basically your partner's perspective and say, what can I do effectively at that point? And so whether it be, the future hypothetical with kids or, something like that, it's like, okay, just talk about it.
So I don't know if we've really ever talked about this, but one of the most hurtful things that my ex-husband did or said, really, was when I was in the process of working with law enforcement. We got our confession from him. They arrested my father, and we were just waiting for the trial, right? I remember very distinctly my ex-husband one day going, I really don't understand why you're doing this to your dad. And I do understand that it's hard for people who have great relationships with their parents to understand going so dramatically to, I'm going to work with law enforcement to have them arrested, and then I'm going to cut off so-and-so family member. And he loved his dad. His dad is a wonderful person. I loved his dad. I think I was sadder about losing my father-in-law than my ex-husband in the relationship when we got divorced. But I know I was actually. My father-in-law was wonderful. But that being said, like that was really hurtful. It felt like I was navigating one of the biggest things in my life alone because my ex-husband didn't just understand it, but he didn't feel it. Like he kind of did this whole thing where, I mean, whatever you want to do, but I don't understand why you do this to your dad. So it didn't feel like getting supported, even though he would say he supported whatever I decided. It didn't feel like support. So if you're that partner, if we were together during that time, I can't imagine you would have said the same thing. And you loved your parents, but maybe I'm just kind of curious on your take on that kind of dynamic. Yeah. Because you love your parents. Your father was a great guy, and I know I never met him, but I've heard amazing things. Your mother is wonderful. So as a person who grew up in a very healthy, happy family, how would you view kind of that discussion?
So my initial, I guess you can say, thought or response to that is that when you first brought that up, the way that you phrased that was, he asked, I don't understand why you're doing this to your dad, kind of thing. And so my first question there is, what did you do to actually help him understand why you were doing that? And not to throw this back on you,
that's
kind
fine.
of thing.
That's fine.
And the reason why I say that is because when we started dating, and you had brought this up, I had that clear understanding initially, and then you eventually showed me like all the court records and everything that go with it. So I had a much deeper understanding than most people would.
Sure.
Because not only did I have, basically the complete history, but I also had that background of my profession that I was able to sift through everything that was there and understand how it was actually, playing out, and can envision like what was happening in the courtroom at that time.
Yeah, it helps you're an attorney, I guess.
And so I never had that issue. And so he might not have had that same level of understanding, which is why he asked that the way that he did. Sure. I think the bigger question would have been, after you tried to explain it to him, did he still feel the same way?
Yeah, and I mean, this is years ago now. I mean, we were together from 2000
and not to interrupt you, but let me put this in another perspective too. It's like, I could say the same thing about a lot of your family members, your grandparents, for example.
Not fully understanding
until you sent them that letter.
Yeah. Okay.
Which was, before we actually got married, kind of thing. Because before that, they were like, well, you should still just try and make up, let her come, kind of thing. And then once you finally spelled it out for them and laid it out for them, yeah, they took clearly a different tack, different approach to it, because it's like they truly got it at that point.
That's true.
And so from a partner perspective, I think this does go both ways a little bit. That's that sort of effective communication, because not defending your ex-husband,
no,
but I could understand potentially why he would feel that way as somebody that has, a strong family connection. He can't, in his life, he has a strong, connection to his dad or his mom, that kind of thing. And he can't conceptualize being in a situation like you were and understanding that and actually being able to see why it is you're doing what it was you're doing. And like how I said in the beginning, how when we first started dating, it's like I was able to, it's not just empathize with you, but understand that it's like you did what you had to do in that situation. And there's really no other way to approach it. And that was reinforced by law enforcement responding to it the way that they did, and district attorney, taking it as far as they did, and the judge issuing the ruling that they did, kind of thing. And so all of those things happen for a reason. And, I was able to see that and understand that, versus somebody that has a great relationship with their family.
And none of those things had happened yet.
And none of those things had happened yet.
Yeah, that's true.
That's again, not defending him, but at the same time going, that's I can understand why he was not clear on that. And so, like I said, I think the bigger question is, once he was made aware of everything?
Right.
How did he respond then?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. And obviously this was a long time ago. We were together from 2006 to 2014, I think.
Because you told me he was in the courtroom.
He did. He ended up being generally supportive. We also got divorced toward the end of the trial, which was unrelated. But no, he's generally supportive. And to his credit, like, we literally got married and my girls moved in a week later. Part-time at first, and they split time with my grandparents, and then full-time. And so he was generally supportive in that regard, which was great. But it was just some of those comments. And I guess from the side of being a victim, I consider if a friend or a family member says, I was abused or I was hurt by this person, I'm generally going to believe them. Like, I'm not going to go out and do anything with that information, but I'm going to believe them and say, I support you, whatever you need to do. I understand. And maybe that's because I am a victim and I have been through those experiences. I can't imagine, my brain cannot comprehend someone telling me my mother, my father, somebody did this to me, and me going, well, I don't understand why you would work with law enforcement to have them arrested. Like, that just so blows my mind. And so I appreciate what you're saying. I guess my brain says I did explain it. It's just so long ago. I don't know what all I had told in depth. Nobody wants to relive their trauma and go into detail about everything that happened to them. I haven't done that with you. You've read the court transcripts for some of the stuff, or you've read the appeal notes, so you have a pretty solid idea compared to anyone else. But that's not because I've sat there and be like, let me relive my trauma with you and tell you every step of thing that happened. And I'm sure I didn't do that with him either, because why would I want to do that?
Take this further too. It's like we had talked about this before. It's like you were hesitant initially about showing me the court records and stuff, and it took you a while to get comfortable enough to actually let me
see the transcript,
see it and everything. Yeah. And so, I mean, with that being the case, it's like it's like I don't know, what it is other people fully understood. It's the same thing with your family. You've had that back and forth relationship with some of your family members that you adore and love, but at the same time, they weren't fully grasping the nature of the situation for a while. So I another video for another time, but I think there has been some really bad reactions to me telling people I was dating or whatever about being abused by my father. And so, you don't want to feel, and this probably also ties with religious trauma and all this other stuff, but like this perception of, I don't want to tell him everything and then he views me as some damaged goods or like I'm broken, because I don't feel broken. I feel very strong and I feel like I'm a survivor, but not everyone looks at it the same way. And so building that trust was really important before I was like, by the way, do you want to read transcripts about all my abuse because you're an attorney and you'll understand, and this way I don't have to explain it to you? It was kind of great, actually, in that regard. Like, well, I want you to know about me, but I don't want to go through it. So here's a transcript of my father's appeal. Have fun. And if you still want to be with me after, let me know. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. I never said that, but it was kind of that idea that if this was a deal breaker, then we'd deal with it early on and go from there. And it wasn't a deal breaker.
And it wasn't a deal breaker. And I knew you well enough, I think, by then that I didn't think it would be. But you're right. My ex-husband, I didn't go into like super granular detail. I just think, like, if the person watching this has a partner or a family member or a friend who's dealing with that kind of thing, I just think I would be shocked if anyone went lightly into, I'm going to work with law enforcement to have so-and-so arrested. I'm sure it's happened. I know that, historically there have been false accusations from things, but it just blows my mind that you wouldn't generally just believe someone. And so, or even just understand why getting justice for some horrible treatment of you is important. But I'm also coming from my own very narrow view, and everyone's coming from their own. So
Yeah.
interesting to hear your perspective on that one.
And it's more than just believing the other person too. It's the real question is, are you supporting them
Yeah.
in such
Through
a
that
way
journey.
through that, whatever that is? Because, and to be fair, and this is not to say in anything in relation to your situation, but like they could be telling the truth, but just have a completely misunderstanding of what happened or something like that. And it's like the question is just
Definitely an attorney talking right here.
yes, but it's again, the question is, are you supporting them, not believing them or not believing them, kind of thing. And,
Right.
and I think giving that support is what's more important than necessarily than anything else per se.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because truth is in the eye of the beholder, so to speak, and it's like obviously you can never truly understand what someone has gone through outside of getting their limited ability to express it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, and I go back to with your situation, it's like there's a reason why it went as far as it did.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's clearly
Evidence, confession.
more than
whatever.
just a
More than just an
allegation
accusation,
or accusation kind of thing. And so in that situation, it's like, yeah, that makes perfect sense the way it worked out from my perspective. But again, it sounded like when your ex-husband had asked that question,
None of that was there.
none of that was there yet.
Even though
So-
he'd been there for a good portion of the discussions. Yeah, maybe he just didn't understand.
Yeah.
That's a good perspective. Has being with me changed anything about the way you think about boundaries in your own life or relationships?
I'm just, the first thought that came to my head is like my very few limited relationships that I have. No, not really. I mean, obviously being with you has changed my circumstances because we obviously live in the mountains, and my family and friends are much further away. So it's, I'm not seeing them as much as I did kind of thing. But again, that's perfectly fine from my perspective. It's just, so it's hard to, I guess, articulate how that has changed my relationships, my boundaries kind of thing.
They've all just kind of
'Cause-
stayed the same. I guess what the question is, like, we've done so much boundary setting with my family over the last 6 years, more than you've probably ever had to do with your own family. And that's the question: is has it changed anything? And I suspect that it probably hasn't much, but it's just a question.
No, not really. I mean, I guess the only thing that sometimes comes up is how much do I want to share with my family on what your issues are.
Ah, interesting.
So it's like I generally will default to if you want to share it, you'll share it kind of thing. So I'm not necessarily like bringing it up in conversation. Oh, by the way, Janae put her dad in prison when we first met kind of thing. It's like that's kind of your wheelhouse, your circus, so to speak. And so it's,
I am very open about these things, but
and you are, which is fine.
but at the same time, yeah,
I'm
you're not.
always taking the perspective. It's like, it's not necessarily my thing to share.
Yeah.
Even though you're so open about it, generally speaking, it's like, that's your experience to share with whoever it is that you're talking about with kind of thing. It's like, it feels awkward of me to just bring that up directly.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, unless it was contextually somehow relevant. Yeah.
Kind of going to how you always joke about how you would ask way more questions of my family than.
Oh, I learned so much
I
more
would,
about his
so,
family
yeah.
in the first 6 months that I knew him than he was like, I didn't know any of that stuff.
Yeah. So, because you would ask the questions, and there's something to be said of that absolutely from the other perspective too. So there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, it's like I'm generally
You're much more reserved
much more reserved.
and private.
Yes, that's a fair way of characterizing it, I would say.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Compliment each other. I'll find out all the stuff, and then you just internalize it and go, okay, I don't think I need this information, but it's fine.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, next question, Matt. What do you think people misunderstand about being the partner of someone who has a complicated or estranged relationship with their family?
I mean, I think it would go to, and I'm not a therapist, but I would just go to, default would be the important thing is you communicate with your partner.
Sure.
And having that understanding with your partner is more important than anything else. And, if there's an issue that you can't get past, then maybe you're not meant to be together. If it's something that, you can work through, it's like, well, then work through it kind of thing. But the important thing is you have to communicate. So
I think, from my perspective, I think one of the things sometimes people misunderstand is how triggering certain things can be when certain situations happen, and I'm not saying with you per se, but just in general. I think the situations I've seen the most frequent with people I care about is something will happen or someone will respond a certain way, and it kind of brings you back to that childhood where you're trapped or you're unable to, control a situation, or you're in a vulnerable state, and it can be very emotional for someone. And I've seen partners respond in a way that they're taking it personally. I don't think you necessarily do that, but I have definitely seen that, and I think it's important to remember that people who've dealt with trauma, it never goes away. It's never fully healed. We do what we can. We go to therapy. Everyone's got their own journey to get through whatever they've been through. But I think it's really important for partners to remember that whatever that trauma is, sometimes there are factors that will affect your partner, and not to take it personally sometimes. Not to say that they should not react, especially if they respond very badly or try to or mistreat someone or anything like that. I'm not trying to excuse bad behavior, but just to be empathetic about what that is, because it can sometimes just be out of your control, when something is very emotional or upsetting. Does that make sense?
yeah, didn't necessarily disagree with anything that you've said. It's just, I guess it's hard for me to speculate how somebody else is misunderstanding their partner's relationship,
Sure.
kind of thing.
Okay.
And so it's like I said, I think the default always has to be you just have to be an effective communicator with your partner.
Well, sure.
So,
Well, and a lot of people are
yeah.
not. That's a huge
And
gap.
that's the problem.
That's a lot. That's
So
the problem.
it's
You got to
like,
communicate.
you've got to be able to communicate that, your needs, your wants, your boundaries and things like that. And like I said, it's like there are some things that maybe, are significant enough that you can't work through, or that they are. And it's just something, like I said, that the baseline has to be that communication.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think of some of the things that, maybe this is a tangent, right? But some of the things you've had to deal with completely involuntary is I have a lot of nightmares. And sometimes I wake up loudly, say yelling or getting upset at something or whatever. And you've been very patient, and you're like, hey, it's a dream, it's okay. And you're like very calm. But there's things that happen, like that kind of thing is very common, I think, for people who've dealt with trauma. And that's just a small
Not just with people that have dealt with trauma. That could be a number of reasons.
Oh, a number of reasons,
Yeah.
absolutely. Anyway,
Yeah.
my point is, I guess this just goes to communication, understanding. I think I warned you before you moved in. I was like, hey, by the way, I sleepwalk. I have lucid dreams, or well, not lucid dreams. I do have those too, but those ones are fine because I can control them. But I have a lot of nightmares, and night terrors is the word I was looking. I sometimes have night terrors, and you were like, oh, okay, this is good to know. And so just kind of, again, going back to that communication, understanding what you're dealing with and what somebody's coming into if they're in a relationship with you. I think it goes both ways, right? As a survivor, it's important for me to explain to any partner I'm with, like, this is who I am and this is what my struggles are. And if we're going to be together long term, this is what it means for...
Which is an example of you communicating to your partner.
But on the partner side is being empathetic and understanding. And it's like, hey,
if I do wake you up at 2 in the morning, it's not intentional. Not that I'm not saying you've ever responded late. Just a random example.
Yeah.
I think the communication and lack of understanding or lack of empathy are where people, I think, have the biggest challenges in any relationship, regardless of whether trauma exists or not. But trauma just kind of adds a whole other layer of complexity to those relationships, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah.
If someone watching this has a partner who is struggling to set boundaries with their family, what would you want that person to know?
So I'm thinking back to you eventually writing that letter. And I think it was, I think I had initially just suggested, or someone had suggested to you that it's like, maybe if you're trying to set a boundary, your family just does not fully understand the situation. And
I think it was a combination of you and my therapist, but yeah.
Yeah, and so it's something that it's clearly not working. It's either you're not communicating it effectively enough, or they're willfully ignoring what it is you're trying to tell them, or set the boundary kind of thing, or something else potentially. But those are probably the two main things. And so I my legal brain jumps in here, where it's like there's this concept in law where you have to, quote, exhaust your administrative remedies before you seek redress in certain civil contexts, things like that. And so if you have tried to communicate in every conceivable way and are still being unsuccessful, then you're going to have to recognize maybe they just don't care, or they're not listening, or some other reason kind of thing. At which point you then have that understanding going into it, and then can go, okay, so what steps do you want to take from there, kind of thing. Versus if you've kind of, just like when we first started dating, I didn't fully get that you had truly communicated that. And then once you did, notice the instant dynamic change kind of thing. And once you actually sent that letter, it's like all of a sudden everyone was like, I didn't realize it was this bad, or I didn't realize that this had happened, or this, that kind of thing, because they just didn't have that background that you had experienced, kind of thing. And then as soon as you did that, like I said, a lot of your dynamics in your family changed drastically. If you've taken all those steps and you're still running into a brick wall, so to speak, it's like you're going to have to probably make some hard choices at that point. But at the same time, you need to sort of go through the motions to make sure that you're actually expressing yourself to the extent that you can, before constantly banging your head against the wall, kind of thing. So I think that's where I go with that, is that if you're having a partner that's struggling to set a boundary, it's like, okay, have they communicated that boundary? And from a neutral third party perspective, like, is there another way that you can help them communicate that boundary, or something like that? And if that's still the case, that they're still having issues with it, then that's another question.
I do realize that putting things in writing is great, because then whoever you're setting that boundary with can go back, they can review the boundary, they can refresh their memory. There's no excuses at that point for not knowing the boundary. And I've talked about this in another video about my sister-in-law has done an amazing job of documenting like what those boundaries are, and setting those with my mother. And my brother has done a really good job with that as well. And you're right, setting a bunch of small boundaries along the way is hard to necessarily cumulatively understand until I wrote that letter. And there was a lot more understanding once I had it all in writing. The other thing I'll say, and this is kind of a tangent, is I felt like there was a huge weight off my shoulders after writing that letter.
It's therapeutic, sure.
But did you, from your perspective, did you see a change in me after writing the letter, or was it just kind of just back to same old afterwards?
There was a little bit of a change initially, because all of a sudden, like, people stopped trying to push the boundaries.
They stopped. A lot of people stopped.
A lot of people stopped. And so
that's true.
The circumstances changed.
True.
And so
it was a lot more peaceful.
I think you noticing those circumstances changing sort of did give you that relief on top of the therapeutic effect of just writing it all out. But at the same time, it's like writing it all out, I'm sure, was stressful
It took me like
in
a
and of
week and a
itself,
half.
because you had to basically revisit everything.
I had to revisit
And so
everything.
it's like, having to go through all that again, at the same time. But I'm sure your therapist told you it was probably therapeutic that you did that. And then having that sort of, it's almost like a journal or something like that, and not have to like internalize it as much anymore.
Yeah, that's true. After everything we've experienced together, what do you think a healthy boundary is actually supposed to do and look like?
As far as a relationship is concerned, it's just supposed to make your lives better in a relationship, make bring you closer together kind of thing, and help you understand one another. But as far as like external third parties, friends, family, that kind of thing, it's again, not only to, sort of set your limitations on where you want to be, but also to prevent outside influences from impacting your day-to-day life in a way negatively that affects and spills over into your other relationships more than anything else. It's probably how I'd approach that, what I'd say to that.
I like it. All right. Well, that was my last question. How was this? Did I torture you too much?
No, we talked about it in advance, so I knew it was coming.
He didn't know the questions in advance. He told me I was going to send them to him in advance, and he refused. He said no, he wanted the reactions to be more authentic and off script, so I appreciate that. But any last comments to the audience here about how to be a supportive partner?
Communication is the biggest thing.
It is 100%. Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, Matthew. I appreciate you. Love you.
Love you too.
And thank you all for being here. As always, I am Janae Cherie, and I'm here to tell my stories. That's not what my ending says. With that being said, thank you, Matthew, for being here. I appreciate you. And thank you all for being here and for listening to us. Let me know if you like this format. I have several people who've expressed interest in being a guest speaker and talking about their journeys. And I'm trying to figure out if the living room setup with this brown curtain background is the right way to do it, or if I need to set something up that's a little fancier. But let me know how this went, and really appreciate your input. My husband, Matthew, has agreed to do actually some really interesting deep dives with me on the legal aspects of my court case to kind of explain the journey. So that's not going to happen right away, but in the next several weeks, I'm hoping to start working on material talking more about the legal side of navigating the court system. And I'm really excited to get an attorney's perspective, because obviously as a victim, I have my own perspective. As an attorney, he's got his very analytical perspective of all the steps. So yeah, tune in for that when it comes. And with that in mind, thank you all for being here. I'm Janae Cherie, and I hope that my stories help you to tell yours.